He was never meant to matter. Not to the man who owned him. Not to the world that had barely noticed him. Just a runt, an undersized German shepherd pup with uneven patches of fur and a tremble that clung to him like a second skin. And yet there he was, dangling above the black churn of the Madison River, held in a grip that had never once offered him comfort. Brisket, 6 months old and small for even a struggling litter, whimpered against the slicing mountain air. His paws hung limp, his ears, too big for his head, quivered as he blinked down at the rush of water beneath the old steel bridge. His body shook, not just from fear, but from the aching question animals somehow always understand far too well. Why? The man holding him answered without words. Gregory Harlan, polished to a sheen that didn't match the rugged Montana landscape, stood rigid at the rail of the aging bridge. He looked like someone misplaced, mid-50s, tall, silver hair slicked back with the meticulousness of someone who couldn't afford flaws. His charcoal coat, tailored and pristine, belonged on Wall Street, not along a forgotten rural crossing that barely made it onto local maps. But it wasn't the coat, nor the shoes, nor the polished, cold exterior that revealed who he truly was. It was his eyes. Hard. Tight. Empty of patience. Empty of mercy. Brisket whimpered, a tiny fractured sound that barely broke through the whistling wind. Gregory's lip curled. "You were supposed to be quiet," he muttered, voice flat as stone. "Supposed to act normal. Not shake every time the microwave dings. Not hide when the blender turns on. Not cry for no reason." His fingers tightened around the pup's midsection. "I don't have space in my life for things I can't control." Another whine escaped Brisket, this one more desperate, as if the world might grant him one more heartbeat if he pleaded softly enough. But Gregory didn't hear it. Or maybe he simply didn't care to. With a breath that fogged in the cold air, he opened his hand. Brisket fell. Time stretched around the tiny body tumbling through the gray afternoon light. His paws flailed. His chest jerked with a soundless cry. The river below roared like something alive, eager to swallow him whole. 100 yards downstream, hidden behind a line of evergreens and winterbear brush, Aidan Voss walked his daily path along the riverbank. The hour never changed, always between 4 and 5, as reliable as the tide. He liked the routine. It steadied him. Kept the ghosts quiet. Aidan, 33, moved with the watchful grace of a man who'd lived too long on instinct. His broad shoulders were wrapped in a faded army green jacket with frayed cuffs. His boots, battered from deserts far from Montana, sank slightly into the damp soil. His hair, dark with hints of sand, was tied back loosely, and the patchy stubble on his jaw suggested shaving had long ago lost its urgency. He had come to Livingston to disappear, not from the law, not from blame, but from memory. After an IED in Helmand had stolen 2 Marines under his command, he'd returned home quieter, slower to speak, quicker to sense danger. Loud noises made his pulse jump. Certain smells sent him back to places he wished he couldn't recall. Still, the river helped. Its rhythm drowned the unrest inside him. Until something broke that rhythm. A splash, sharp, violent, cut through the steady rush of water. Aidan froze mid-step. His breath held. That sound wasn't normal. Not a fish. Not an Animal Crossing. It carried urgency. Desperation. Then came the second sound, a choked, frantic yelp. He didn't think. He moved. Boots slipping in mud, he sprinted toward the riverbank, ripping off his jacket as he ran. His muscles reacted from memory, from training, even before his mind registered the shape flailing in the water. A small body bobbing, sinking, resurfacing. A pup. Still fighting. Barely. Aidan dove in without hesitation. The icy water punched his chest with its cold, but he pushed through it, kicking hard toward the struggling animal. The pup went under again, tiny legs clawing at nothing. "Hold on," Aidan muttered through clenched teeth, though the pup couldn't hear him. He reached out, fingers brushing wet fur, then clamped his hand around the slippery, trembling form. Brisket's body was limp from exhaustion, but his terrified eyes flickered at the contact, as if some small part of him understood salvation took many shapes. Aiden hauled him close against his chest and fought the current back toward shore. His boots dragged. His lungs burned. But step by step, he forced his way out of the river. He collapsed on the rocks, still holding the soaked pup tight. The world narrowed to three sounds: Aiden's ragged breathing, the river's growl, and the fragile whimpers of the half-drowned animal clinging to life on his chest. That noise, soft, quivering, hit Aiden somewhere deep, in a place he thought he had sealed shut. It sounded too familiar. Too much like the whisper Corporal Diaz had given him in Kandahar, a broken plea from a dying young man calling out for his mother with the voice of a child. Aiden swallowed hard against the memories clawing up his throat. He looked down at the drenched pup, whose eyes were wide and glassy but alive. "You made it," Aiden whispered, voice rough. "Yeah, you made it, kid." Brisket trembled harder, then tucked his nose against Aiden's chest. Aiden stood slowly, still cradling the pup as water dripped from both of them in heavy, uneven droplets. He didn't look toward the bridge. He didn't need to. Whoever had dropped this dog from the ledge was long gone. People like that never stayed to watch consequences unfold. With the river roaring behind him like an angry witness, Aiden began the long walk back to his cabin tucked along the tree line. The mountains rose tall and quiet behind him. The dog weighed almost nothing in his arms, yet somehow, he felt heavier. Significant. Aiden didn't know it yet, but this shivering, fragile creature had just altered the entire course of his life. Sometimes, the things meant to save us arrive in unexpected shapes. And sometimes, miraculously, they survive long enough to find us. By the time Aiden stepped onto the gravel path leading to his cabin, twilight had dissolved into a deepening blue. The mountains behind him had shifted into hulking silhouettes, their sharp ridges softening beneath spreading shadows. The forest whispered with the last breath of daylight as the cold crept in steadily, threading through the pines like a quiet truth. Against his chest, the rescued pup lay silent, his soaked fur clinging to Aiden's jacket. Brisket didn't squirm or whine. He simply endured, small frame trembling with the exhaustion of almost not surviving. Aiden's cabin sat tucked where the land dipped toward the tree line, a modest two-room structure built by his grandfather decades before he was born. It wasn't pretty, not by any civilized measure. Moss clung to the foundation stones, and the cedar siding had long turned gray. The roof sagged at one corner, and the porch creaked with every season's mood. But to Aiden, it was enough. Enough quiet, enough distance, enough isolation to feel like air finally belonged to him again. He nudged the front door open with his shoulder, and a wave of warmth brushed over his cold skin. The wood-burning stove glowed faintly in the corner, its embers still alive from earlier. The familiar scent of pine resin, burnt coffee, and aged leather hung in the air, his odd, comforting mix of solitude. He set the pup down gently on a folded towel near the stove. Brisket blinked at the flickering firelight, his gaze wide, almost reverent. Like the flames were telling him something he had never seen before. Aiden crouched, draping another towel over the dog and rubbing slow, careful circles to dry him. "You're a strange little guy," he murmured. "Not a sound out of you." Brisket just stared. And it was an unsettlingly deep stare, not fearful, not vacant. Observing. Measuring. Like he was memorizing Aiden's face, the motion of his hands, the pitch of his voice. Like every detail mattered. Aiden wasn't used to being watched this closely. Not since the Marines. And even then, no one had watched him with the kind of focus this little creature seemed to possess. He fetched a chipped ceramic bowl, filled it with clean water, and set it beside the towel. Brisket hesitated, then leaned forward and drank in slow, deliberate laps. "Good," Aiden said. "Easy. You're safe." Safe. A word Aiden had rarely believed in the last few years. Later that night, wrapped in an old wool blanket and settled in his worn armchair, Aiden finally let his body rest. The fire cracked softly. Outside, the wind brushed against the cabin walls with the low hum of winter settling deeper into the land. Brisket didn't curl up like a normal puppy might. He stayed exactly where Aiden had placed him, lying on the towel, head raised, eyes locked on Aiden like a sentinel who refused to let the world shift without watching it happen. Aiden sighed, half irritated, half amused. "You're not going to let me ignore you, are you?" No bark. No movement. Just that quiet, unwavering presence. Eventually, exhaustion won. Aiden drifted into sleep in the armchair, the fire warming his legs. And sometime in the deep hours of the night, the pup rose, as silent as frost forming on glass, and curled himself beneath Aiden's outstretched hand. When morning light filtered through the thin curtains, Aiden found him there, tiny, warm, pressed close enough that his fur tickled Aiden's wrist. The days that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Brisket never barked. Not once. He didn't chew on shoes or attack the furniture. He simply followed Aiden with a quiet precision that wasn't normal for most dogs, much less a traumatized puppy. Aiden noticed it first during chores. When he'd open the front door, Brisket would pad behind him but stop exactly at the threshold, waiting for permission to cross. When Aiden walked the property line, the dog matched each step with uncanny timing, turning when Aiden turned, stopping exactly where he stopped, as if following an invisible script. Other behaviors were even stranger. The cracked tile near the sink. Brisket avoided it every single time, hopping over it neatly like stepping on it meant breaking some unspoken rule. The coffee pot's little hiss at the end of its cycle. Brisket always waited exactly 4 seconds before lifting his head, as if counting. Once, Aiden caught him by the water trough behind the cabin. The hose had begun to spill over, pooling near the garden path. Without any panic or playfulness, Brisket nudged the hose with his nose, just slightly, angling the flow away so the water rerouted cleanly down the gravel line. No mischief. Just correction. Aiden couldn't help but stare. "You're something else," he muttered. And though the dog didn't react outwardly, Aiden felt, somehow, that he understood the words. A week after the rescue, Aiden made the decision to go into town for supplies. It wasn't far, 15 minutes of winding dirt road, but far enough that he usually dreaded the human interaction it demanded. Brisket watched him calmly from the rug. "I won't be long," Aiden told him, slipping into his jacket. 20 minutes. "You'll be fine." The dog's ears tilted in opposite directions, a look that somehow conveyed confusion and disapproval at the same time. Aiden shook his head. "Don't give me that. You're not coming." He stepped outside. And when he returned sooner than expected, half out of worry he refused to acknowledge, Brisket was exactly where he'd been, nose pressed lightly to the window, waiting. Aiden exhaled through his nose. "Yeah," he murmured. "I missed you too." He didn't expect company that evening. People didn't drop by unannounced out here. That was its greatest perk. So the knock on his door at dusk made him stiffen immediately. He opened it to find a familiar figure framed by the fading light. Sarah Monroe. Late 40s, built like a walking oak tree, with steel-gray braids swaying over her shoulders and a limp she never bothered explaining unless someone pushed too hard. She ran the feed store in town. Had known Aiden's mother before she passed. And she carried the kind of no-nonsense presence that warned a man not to waste her time. "Saw your truck at the general store," she said. "Heard you brought something home." Aiden stepped aside. Brisket sat on the floor not far away. As Sarah entered, the dog watched her with eyes that held no fear, only caution. He didn't run. Didn't bark. Didn't hide. Sarah crouched, slowly, mindful of her injured leg, and extended her hand palm up. "You ain't dumb, are you?" she murmured. "You're just different." Brisket sniffed her fingers. Then, after a beat, placed one gentle paw, into her open hand. Sarah raised a brow. Well, hell. He's got a mind in there. They talked by the fire for a while, Sarah sipping terrible coffee without complaint. The warmth softened her expression, and after a long silence, she spoke quietly. You didn't come back for the funerals. Aidan stared into the fire. Didn't think it would help anything. They were your men. I know. She didn't push further. She never did. But when she left, she squeezed his shoulder and said softly. That dog didn't land in your life by accident. You two found each other for a reason. When the cabin fell quiet again, Brisket returned to his place by the fire. Aidan lay beside him this time, the glow painting their shapes in amber and gold. He rested his hand on the pup's back. Maybe, he whispered, this is home for you now. Brisket blinked slowly. Then closed his eyes. He didn't move closer. But he didn't move away, either. And that was enough. Winter came earlier than it had any right to. Each morning, thin webs of frost crawled over the cabin windows like delicate scars. The grass crunched under Aidan's boots the same way shattered glass used to crunch under Humvee tires. The Madison River moved slower now, its edges glazed with newborn ice that cracked softly when the wind shifted. Aidan had once loved this kind of quiet, clean, untouched, swallowing all the noise the world insisted on making. But something was different now. Brisket paced by the window every morning, stiff-bodied, alert, watching the line of trees like he expected something to step out of them. Silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like waiting. The midnight truck. It happened first around midnight. Aidan had fallen asleep on the couch again, flannel blanket half sliding off him, the cabin dim except for the stove glow. Brisket lay curled by the door, head resting on his paws like he'd learned sentry duty from someone who'd done it for years. Then the pup jerked upright. Not startled, alert. His ears twitched. His body locked into one rigid line. A low growl vibrated in his chest, barely audible but unmistakably a warning. Aidan blinked awake. Before he could ask what was wrong, he heard it too, a faint, deliberate crunch of tires on snow. A vehicle rolling slowly up the gravel road toward the gate. Aidan didn't move at first. He listened. The truck approached. Stopped. No headlights. No door opening. Aidan's pulse thrummed. Then, just as quietly, the engine rumbled again. The truck reversed, backing into the trees until the sound disappeared into the night's thick silence. Brisket didn't relax. He stayed rooted in place, nose pressed to the bottom of the door, as though searching the wind for the stranger's scent. After a long moment, Aidan whispered. Yeah. I heard it too. Tracks in the snow. Morning brought a thin layer of fresh snow across Livingston's hills. Brisket bounded into the yard with a new intensity, every sense sharp. He paused near the fence line, nose hovering over a faint set of tire tracks. His tail stiffened. Aidan followed, crouching beside him. Every instinct Aidan had built over 2 tours returned in a quiet rush, the same instincts that once told him when a road was wrong, when a crowd was too still, when a rooftop hid more than birds. Something didn't sit right. Someone had come to his property without wanting to be seen. It was no lost hunter, he murmured. Brisket's ears twitched in agreement. The bark that broke the quiet. 2 days passed without incident. Then, during a late lunch of reheated beans at the small kitchen table, Brisket let out a bark, a sharp, sudden bark that cracked the quiet cabin like a whip. Aidan nearly dropped his fork. Brisket's gaze was locked on the old TV perched on a narrow table, its rabbit ear antenna wrapped in electrical tape. The screen flickered, then resolved into a news broadcast. A financial probe. Federal investigation. A scrolling ticker line. A name flashed by for barely a second. Lawn Guard Corp. Brisket barked again. Then did something stranger. He ran to the half-open drawer beside the fireplace, the one Aiden hadn't touched in years, and began pawing at it with frantic precision. Brisket. Aiden stood. Hey, what's gotten into you? But the dog didn't stop. He shoved aside old matchbooks, notepads, faded receipts, until his nose hit something small and matte black, a USB drive with a hairline crack down the center. Aiden froze. There was no mistaking it. How the hell? That drive was from a job he'd taken years ago. Private security work for a corporate firm whose spreadsheets didn't match its buildings. He'd raised questions. They'd politely told him to forget what he saw. He terminated the contract early, tossed the backup drive in a drawer, and pretended he never knew the name Lawnguard Corp. Until now. Aiden plugged the drive into his aging laptop. The machine groaned to life, screen flickering. Most folders were empty, scrubbed clean long ago, but one remained untouched. Internal forecast, March. Brisket nudged the laptop with his nose, stopping with the tip of his snout resting beneath that file name. Aiden stared at him. You want me to open that one? The pup didn't blink. Aiden clicked. A spreadsheet filled the screen, rows of numbers and projections that at first glance looked ordinary. But buried beneath them were subtle inconsistencies, growth charts that didn't align with reality, valuations that spiked without explanation, and metadata revealing the last editor. Gregory. Brisket. Aiden stood. Hey, what's gotten into you? But the dog didn't stop. He shoved aside old matchbooks, notepads, faded receipts, until his nose hit something small and matte black, a USB drive with a hairline crack down the center. Aiden froze. There was no mistaking it. How the hell? That drive was from a job he'd taken years ago. Private security work for a corporate firm whose spreadsheets didn't match its buildings. He'd raised questions. They'd politely told him to forget what he saw. He terminated the contract early, tossed the backup drive and the bookkeeper who saw through numbers. At dawn, Aiden drove toward the edge of town. Brisket sat upright in the passenger seat, gaze steady, posture unnervingly calm, as if he understood this mattered. They pulled up to a small house with chipped paint and a garden overrun by winter. The mailbox read W. Monroe. Winnie Monroe, Sarah's older sister. 64. A retired bookkeeper who could spot a crooked number faster than most forensic accountants. She opened the door, hands dusted with flour, eyes twinkling with suspicion. Well, look what the wind dragged in, she said. You bring trouble today, Mr. Voss. Aiden held up the USB. I need a second set of eyes. Coffee's on, she replied, stepping aside. Good thing you brought the smart one with you. Aiden smirked despite himself. Inside her warm kitchen, Winnie sat at her old desktop and loaded the file. Her expression shifted within minutes, eyebrows furrowing, lips tightening. This isn't bookkeeping, she muttered. This is laundering. She tapped the screen. Swiss routing numbers, shell corporations, fake valuation bumps. And this, she clicked deeper, this doesn't belong anywhere legitimate. She paused, glancing down at Brisket, who sat at her feet with eerie attentiveness, gaze fixed on the scrolling figures like they were music. You found this, didn't you? She asked softly. Brisket wagged his tail once. Winnie's eyes widened. Lord have mercy. What kind of dog remembers numbers? A dog who wasn't supposed to, Aiden said quietly. But did. Winnie printed a handful of documents, stuffed them into an envelope, and placed a warm scone in Aiden's hand, because she was the kind of person who worried food solved small pieces of big problems. As he reached the door, she touched his arm. Keep him close, she whispered. People who hide things this big, they don't like loose ends. Brisket growled low, staring through the screen door at the snowy hills. It wasn't the wind he sensed. Something was coming. And for the first time, Aiden feared Brisket might already know exactly what. Snow had settled deeper across the hills of Livingston, muffling sound and slowing the world to a crawl. The cold wasn't cruel yet, but it carried a sharp edge, a warning of harsher days creeping closer. Aidan felt it in his bones, but more importantly, he saw something change in Brisket. The dog had grown more restless. Not anxious, alert. He began noticing things Aidan hadn't. Footsteps that weren't theirs. A shift in the wind direction. A distant mechanical hum buried under the quiet of the woods. Brisket didn't bark or pace wildly. He simply listened with the intensity of something remembering danger. And then one morning, Brisket veered off their normal walking route entirely. The detour. They had barely stepped outside, breath steaming in the cold air. Aidan sipped from his thermos, boots crunching through layered frost. Brisket walked at his side with his usual calm, until his body stiffened, and he turned sharply toward a cluster of cedar trees. He refused to budge until Aidan followed. "What is it?" Aidan murmured, but the pup had already slipped ahead. The cedar grove opened into a neglected stretch of land Aidan hadn't walked in years, an abandoned industrial site from a decade-old real estate boom that had fizzled before it ever blossomed. Rusted support frames leaned like wounded skeletons. Signs lay broken in the snow, their letters peeled or missing. The air smelled of metal and damp paper. Brisket moved with purpose, not curiosity. Aidan tightened his grip on his jacket and stepped carefully. They approached what remained of a prefab office. Its metal siding had caved inward, the glass shattered, door crooked on its hinges. Snow clung to every surface in thin layers. Brisket slipped through the doorway. Aidan hesitated, then followed him inside. The air was stale. Old papers lay scattered across the floor, curled with time, smudged with mold. Desks had collapsed, cabinets had rusted through, and the faint metallic tang in the air smelled like forgotten secrets. Brisket made straight for the corner where a wooden crate leaned against the wall. He pawed at it once, then twice, sharp, deliberate movements. Aidan knelt, pried the lid off with the back of his knife, and froze. Inside the crate were folders bound with brittle rubber bands. Recent dates. Unmistakable stamps. Lawn Guard Corp. Aidan picked up a folder. The weight of it felt wrong. Receipts. Forecasts. Shell company structures. Names he recognized from the old job. And threaded through several documents, scrawled signatures. Gregory Harlan. "What the hell?" Aidan whispered. Brisket nudged his leg, then stared down at the pile as though urging him to keep going. Aidan stacked the documents neatly, sliding them into a canvas bag he kept in his truck. He was securing the last folder when a noise ripped through the dead air. A distorted electronic trill, like a phone ringing. Brisket whipped around, fur raised, a guttural growl trembling in his chest. Aidan spun toward the sound. In the corner lay an old landline phone, half buried under shattered ceiling tile. Its casing was cracked, wires exposed, but it was unmistakably ringing. Impossible. There was no power. The ringing abruptly cut, replaced by a click. Then a hollow silence hummed through the receiver, as if something, or someone, had ended the call. Aidan stared at it. "This place is dead," he muttered. "It shouldn't be doing anything." Brisket stepped toward the phone, sniffed it, then backed up sharply. The sound had triggered something in him, something deeper than fear. Aidan slung the canvas bag over his shoulder. "We're leaving." They didn't speak on the walk back through the trees. Brisket glanced over his shoulder more than once, nose twitching, muscles taut beneath his fur. Aidan understood the feeling. They weren't alone out there. Cecilia Monroe's insight. Instead of heading home, Aidan steered the truck east, toward the small yellow farmhouse that belonged to Cecilia Monroe. Her lights were already glowing through the frosted windows when he pulled up. Before Aidan could knock, Cecilia opened the door, steam from her kitchen swirling around her like smoke. "I felt you coming," she said, smiling softly. Bring whatever trouble you found inside. Aiden placed the canvas bag on the kitchen table. Cecilia lowered herself into a chair, slid on her wireframe glasses, and began sorting through the documents. She turned the pages quickly, her fingertips moving with the practiced precision of someone who had once taught disciplined minds how to think in perfect patterns. Her expression remained calm, until she reached the third folder. This projection is forged, she said, holding the page to the light. Not even cleverly. Whoever created this faked the math but didn't understand how compounding works. It's designed to fool investors, not anyone who knows numbers. Brisket stood beside Aiden, nose hovering near the edge of the table. His gaze locked on the paper like it was a familiar enemy. He already knew, Cecilia murmured, looking down at the pup. He recognized the mistake before we even opened it. She traced the columns with her finger. Dogs don't forget sounds. Not if those sounds mattered. Not if they came from fear. Aiden rubbed his jaw. He found the crate. I didn't. Cecilia nodded as if she had already expected that. This dog isn't just intelligent, she said. He's a living record. Whoever spoke around him, left conference calls on, watched financial reviews, argued about numbers, Brisket remembered the cadence. The tone. The mistakes. Could this hold up in court? Aiden asked. Maybe not as evidence, she replied, but as a breadcrumb. As a pattern only someone with inside knowledge could recognize. She tapped the page. An investigator would look twice. And that, she drew a red circle around one name, is your motive. Gregory Harlan. The man who had dropped Brisket off a bridge. Cecilia closed the folder gently. Aiden, she whispered. He tried to erase this dog. Brisket let out a tiny whimper and pressed his chin against Aiden's boot. Before leaving, Cecilia gave Aiden a clean set of annotated documents, her notes carefully handwritten in tight, neat cursive. Keep these safe, she warned. And keep him safer. The drive back through the falling snow was silent. Brisket curled on the passenger seat, head pressed to the cold glass, watching the dark forest blur past. Aiden gripped the wheel tighter. Some truths were numbers. Some were voices. And some walked on four legs. The snow hadn't let up for days. Livingston lay beneath a heavy, muffled blanket of white, the kind that silenced tires, swallowed footsteps, and made the whole world feel paused in place. Roads shrank to narrow ribbons. Power lines bowed under frost. Even the sky carried the dull weight of unbroken gray. In the middle of it stood Aiden Voss, coat pulled tight against his neck, while Brisket carved silent paths through fresh snow, nose low, tail stiff, every movement deliberate. The pup wasn't playing. He was tracing, tracking, thinking. Aiden watched him from the porch, a strange knot forming in his chest. For years, quiet had meant safety. Now it felt like something crouching in the dark. Inside, the cabin was warm. The kettle hissed softly on the stove. The radio hummed an AM station crackling with more static than music. Aiden rarely posted anything online, but that morning, as he wiped down his workbench, he caught sight of Brisket curled in a patch of sunlight. On impulse, he snapped a picture. He uploaded it to a private veteran support network he checked maybe once a month. His caption was simple. Found this little guy a few weeks ago. Didn't realize he'd be the one keeping me steady. He expected nothing. But 2 hours later, the comments began rolling in. Hank Fletcher, a former supply sergeant. I swear I've seen that dog before. At a lawn guard retreat in Big Sky. Weird little thing, acted like he was listening to board meetings. Then another, Sergeant Santos, retired Marine now working in financial fraud investigation. DM me. I've seen that pattern, not on a dog, but on reports. Something's off. The photo traveled quietly through the online circles of veterans, men and women who once kicked down doors, now fighting quieter battles with spreadsheets, audits, and corporate red tape. Brisket's face, with its caramel patches and deep-thinking stare, had stirred something. By dusk, Aiden felt watched, not by the woods, but by something approaching. He wasn't wrong. The visitor. Late in the afternoon, Aiden was chopping firewood near the barn when he heard the crunch of tires on snow. Brisket was already alert, body angled toward the sound long before Aiden turned. A gray Range Rover rolled slowly up the driveway. Brisket stood rigid on the porch, ears tall, tail down, muscles coiled. The door opened, revealing a woman who did not belong in rural Montana. She stepped out with the composure of someone used to boardrooms, not blizzards, early 40s, angular cheekbones, dark hair tied neatly behind her in a twist. Her navy pea coat was expertly cut, her slacks and heeled boots were not made for snowbanks. She offered a polite, rehearsed smile. "I'm sorry to intrude. My name is Helen Ward." Aiden kept the axe in hand, resting it lightly but making no effort to hide the fact that he wasn't welcoming surprise guests. "I heard," she continued, "that a shepherd was found near the Madison River. White markings, small frame, distinctive gait. I've been searching for a dog matching that description." Brisket's growl rumbled low, lower than Aiden had ever heard. Helen's eyes flicked to the dog. For a moment, her polished demeanor cracked. Her jaw tensed. "He belonged to someone I worked with," she said evenly. "Someone, recently deceased. That right?" Aiden asked, voice flat. "Yes. Gregory Harlan." Aiden didn't move. "You know," Helen went on, her tone shifting subtly, "it's dangerous for a dog to be out here alone. Especially one who's been through something traumatic." Brisket stepped in front of Aiden, silent but fierce, hackles raised. Helen exhaled, a small, strained breath. "Please. If you know anything, anything at all, about where that dog came from, I'm staying at the Bristlewood Inn. Room 2C. She backed away toward the SUV, her boots too crisp for snow, her eyes lingering on Brisket with something uncomfortably like resentment. Brisket's growl didn't stop until the car vanished down the road. Her name appears again. Later that evening, Aiden sat at the table with the old USB drive plugged into his laptop. He reopened the internal forecast folder Brisket had pointed to weeks ago. Among Gregory Harlan's edits, buried deep in the metadata, was another name. Helena Ward. Aiden's stomach tightened. He shuffled through the printed reports, some pages sliding to the floor. Brisket immediately moved, nose nudging one specific sheet. A heading caught Aiden's eye. Trust Management and Allocations, Ward. She wasn't his colleague, Aiden murmured. She was part of it. Brisket pressed against Aiden's leg. This wasn't a coincidence. It had never been. Seeking guidance again. Aiden drove back through falling snow to Cecilia Monroe's farmhouse. As soon as he stepped inside, she had already placed 2 mugs on the kitchen table, steam curling from their rims. "You met someone," she said, not looking up from the pot she was stirring. "Helen Ward," Aiden replied. "Says she's looking for Brisket." Cecilia snorted softly. "No one like her chases dogs through snow for sentimental reasons." Aiden set the files on the table. "She's tied to lawn guard. Her name's on the internal documents." Cecilia slid her glasses on and flipped through the papers. She edited valuation drafts. That makes her part of the inner circle." She tapped the page. "Her type is the cleanup crew. When executives get sloppy, she handles the cover-up, moves assets, erases loose ends." Brisket growled softly at the mention of her name. "That woman didn't come here for a dog," Cecilia said. "She came to bury the last witness with ears." She handed Aiden a stack of manila envelopes. "I made copies of everything you brought me. The rest I forwarded to my nephew Kyle. Works quiet for the sheriff's office. Sharp kid." Stubborn. Won't look the other way. Aiden raised a brow. You trust him with this? I trust him with my life, she said simply. And that's more than I can say for most. Brisket lay by the hearth, tail curled around himself, eyes heavy but watchful. Cecilia looked at him with something close to tenderness. That woman wanted to erase you, she whispered. But fate has a funny way of rewriting what evil tries to delete. The message sent. That night, Aiden posted again to the veteran group. This time he attached a redacted screenshot of one of Helena Ward's spreadsheets. His caption read, "Anyone with records of Helena Ward's time at Lawn Guard, contact me. The dog isn't the only one who remembers." He didn't expect answers. But within the hour, a private message arrived from Captain Santos. "You're not dealing with this alone. She's been on the radar for a while. That dog might be the link we've been missing." Aiden stared at the message. Brisket nudged his hand gently. For the first time in months, Aiden whispered something he hadn't felt in years. "They're finally counting what matters." Brisket pressed closer, as if he understood. Because danger was coming. And so was justice. Snow fell steadily throughout the night, tapering only when dawn crept over the horizon. Livingston seemed frozen in place, every roof frosted white, every fencepost crowned with soft ice. The world felt hushed, like it was waiting for something to break the stillness. Inside the cabin, Aiden sat at the table with a mug of black coffee, staring at the documents spread before him. Brisket lay under the window, chin resting on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. He wasn't sleeping. Not really. The pup had barely slept at all. Every sound sent his ears twitching. Every shift in the wind made him lift his head. His vigilance wasn't anxious, it was practiced, the way someone behaves when danger feels too close to ignore. Aiden rubbed his hands over his face. "Easy, buddy," he murmured. "We'll figure this out." Brisket didn't move, but his tail flicked once. They were both tired of waiting. A footprint that didn't belong. When the sun finally climbed high enough to melt a thin sheen across the top layer of snow, Aiden stepped outside to bring in firewood. Brisket followed close behind, nose already working the air. Aiden rounded the corner of the cabin, and stopped. A single boot print sat near the back fence. Not his. Not recent. Snow had softened the edges, but it hadn't fallen enough to bury it completely. The print was large, deep, the kind made by someone moving with purpose rather than wandering. Aiden crouched. Brisket lowered his head beside him, sniffing with soft, rapid breaths. Then the dog stiffened, backing up one step as if startled. Aiden's pulse kicked up. Someone had been inside the perimeter. Not just near the road, not lingering at a distance, right here, behind the cabin. Watching. The print pointed toward the woods, where the trees thickened like a wall of shadows. Aiden followed it a few steps, but the trail disappeared where the snow had settled unevenly. "Come on," he murmured, forcing himself to stay steady. "Let's check the line." For half an hour he walked the property's southern edge. Brisket stayed close, occasionally pausing to sniff the wind before resuming the walk. Nothing else appeared. No more prints. No broken branches. No cigarette ash, no tire marks. If someone had come, they'd been careful. And they hadn't stayed long. Aiden exhaled, clouding the cold air. Someone was circling. And Brisket sensed more than Aiden did. Kyle Monroe makes contact. Around noon, Aiden's phone buzzed. Kyle Monroe. The young deputy had never called him before. Aiden answered. "Mr. Voss." Kyle sounded out of breath. "Are you at home?" "Yeah. I need to talk to you. In person." "It can't wait." Brisket lifted his head sharply, sensing the tension in Aiden's posture. "What's going on?" Aiden asked. Kyle hesitated. I think you've stirred something bigger than you know. And someone's trying to stir it back. Aiden felt the knot in his chest tighten. Come by. I'm already on my way. The call dropped. Minutes later, Kyle's county truck rolled into the driveway, tires crunching through the snow. Kyle stepped out, cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes darting toward the trees. Inside the cabin, Brisket sat near Aiden's feet as Kyle paced the living room, clutching a manila folder. I searched the sheriff's archives, Kyle said. Cross-referenced those documents Cecilia sent. There's a pattern of strange financial activity around Lawn Guard, shell accounts, transfers, revolving funds. But this, he tapped the folder. This is the part you need to see. He handed Aiden a police report. Incident, vehicle abandoned. Bridge 14A. Status, closed. Details, driver missing, presumed deceased. Recovered item, 1 canine collar with partial tag. Aiden's heart dropped. Brisket shifted closer, leaning into his leg. That report? Kyle continued. It was filed 2 days before you found him. And the signature on the bottom, he flipped the page. Belongs to the same unit that works closely with Langard's internal security. Aiden stared at him. Meaning someone filed a fake report to bury evidence. Kyle nodded grimly. Exactly. Brisket let out a small, low whine. Aiden placed a steadying hand on the dog's back. Kyle lowered his voice. And that's not the worst part. Someone tried to access the report this morning. Someone who doesn't work for us. A chill crawled through Aiden's spine. That's why I came here, Kyle said. I need you to be careful. Whoever's looking for you, or for him, knows what they're doing. Aiden swallowed hard. You think they're local? Kyle shook his head. I think they're close. And getting closer. Brisket shifted on his paws, gaze locked on the window. The woman returns. That afternoon, heavy clouds gathered low over the hills, carrying the promise of another storm. Aiden tried to focus on work, anything to calm the growing tension, but his nerves were taut. Brisket stayed glued to him. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on the door. Not hesitant. Not polite. Aiden's muscles went rigid. Brisket's growl thundered from deep in his chest. Aiden opened the door only a crack. Helen Ward stood on the porch, snow dusting her shoulders, hair perfectly in place despite the wind. Her gaze was icy, her smile thinner than paper. Mr. Voss, she said smoothly. I thought you might reconsider speaking with me. Aiden kept his voice level. There's nothing more to discuss. She tilted her head. I think there is. Quite a bit, actually. Her eyes flicked downward. Especially regarding that animal. Brisket stepped forward, placing himself between them. Helen's expression faltered for a fraction of a second. You don't know what you're getting involved in. There are people who will not appreciate you interfering. Aiden narrowed his eyes. Then they should have stayed away from my property. Helen exhaled through her nose, a subtle show of irritation. You're protecting a liability, she said. A dangerous one. If that dog retained anything at all, from the environment he came from, then you're holding something you don't understand. Aiden didn't blink. I understand enough. Do you? Her voice sharpened. Because this isn't about your dog. It's about preventing a financial catastrophe. You can't imagine the fallout if certain information leaked. Aiden didn't respond. Helen leaned forward, voice dropping to a cold whisper. Bring him to me. And all of this goes away. Aiden shut the door. Firmly. Brisket pressed his head against Aiden's leg, trembling with controlled fear or rage, it was impossible to tell. Aiden looked down at him. No one's taking you, he said softly. Brisket lifted his eyes, trusting him completely. The night thickens. By evening, a blizzard rolled through Livingston. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the cabin walls and swallowing the forest in white. Aidan stoked the fire until it glowed bright, but the warmth did little to ease the sense of unease crawling under his skin. He set out food for Brisket, but the pup barely touched it. Instead, Brisket sat facing the door, ears perked, gaze locked on the shadows moving outside the frosted windows. Aidan checked the locks. Then checked them again. The night felt wrong. Too still. Too focused. And then Brisket's head shot up. A sound, faint, distant, carried through the storm. A noise Aidan couldn't hear, but the dog could. Brisket stood. Growled. Then moved closer to the door, body rigid. Aidan's hand tightened around the grip of his flashlight. "Talk to me," he whispered. "What do you hear?" Brisket didn't turn. He stared into the storm as if waiting for something to emerge from the white void. Then came it. A soft metallic click outside the cabin. A latch. A shift. A footstep. Aidan's pulse surged. Someone was out there. And they weren't waiting anymore. The storm hammered the cabin like a living thing, wind shrieking through the gaps in the wood, snow slamming against the windows hard enough to rattle the glass. But beneath all that chaos, Aidan could hear something else. A second rhythm. A quieter one. Footsteps. Brisket had already locked onto the sound. He stood rigid in front of the door, tail low, body braced as though ready to intercept whatever came through it. His growl was quiet but steady, the kind meant to warn rather than threaten. Aidan slowly reached for the rifle mounted above the mantel. He didn't aim it. He just held it, grip firm, breath controlled. His heart thudded once, hard, before settling into a steady combat rhythm he hadn't felt since deployment. He moved to the window, lifted a sliver of the curtain, and peered out. The storm reduced the world to a swirling white void. No figures. No vehicles. Just a shapeless mass of wind and ice. But someone was there. He felt it. Brisket felt it. Aidan stepped back, lowering his voice. "Stay behind me." Brisket didn't listen. He edged closer to the door, body vibrating with instinct. Another sound cracked through the storm, a scrape, like metal brushing wood. The back latch. Someone testing it. Aidan clenched his jaw, muscles tightening. They were probing the cabin's defenses, checking exits. Not breaking in with force, searching for the weak spot. A professional. Suddenly, the footsteps retreated, swallowed by the roaring storm. Aidan held still. So did the dog. Then, silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Brisket inhaled deeply, nose twitching. Whoever had been there was gone. For now. A decision in the dark. Aidan didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room with the fire burning low, rifle leaning against the chair, documents spread out across the table. Lamps cast long shadows that flickered with the dance of the flames. Brisket eventually settled beside him, pressed close enough that Aidan could feel the dog's quick, shallow breaths. Fatigue tugged at the pup's eyelids, but he refused to rest fully. Every small sound made him stir. Aidan stroked the short fur along Brisket's neck. "You're carrying too much," he muttered. The dog shifted closer. Aidan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He could run. He could pack up the truck, disappear into the Rockies, lose every trail. But running wouldn't keep Brisket safe. The dog had something that mattered to the people chasing them. And those people weren't going to stop. There was only one option left. Expose them before they silenced the last witness. Aidan grabbed his phone and opened the message thread with Captain Santos. He typed quickly. "We were visited. They're circling. I need to make this public before someone gets hurt." The reply came almost instantly. "Then we go big. Send everything." I'll push it forward through the right channels. Aiden felt the heaviness in his chest ease just a fraction. But then, Brisket's head shot up. His ears sharpened. A soft rumble left his throat. Aiden froze. What is it now? Brisket rose slowly, steps cautious, moving toward the window like he was stalking a ghost. Aiden stood, heart hammering. The storm had finally weakened. Wind still howled, but the snow had thinned, visibility widening. Aiden lifted the curtain a notch. And there it was. A single figure in the distance, standing perfectly still at the tree line. He couldn't see their face. Just a dark silhouette framed by the pale snow. Watching the cabin. Watching them. Aiden whispered, "Not again." He reached for the rifle. But when he looked back, the figure had vanished. A warning from the past. The next morning, the storm had cleared. A fragile, deceptive calm blanketed Livingston. Sunlight glimmered off the snow, making everything look painfully peaceful. They both knew it wasn't. Aiden checked the perimeter again, this time with Brisket leading the way. The dog moved methodically, sniffing every branch, every gate post, every drift of snow. Near the edge of the property, he stopped abruptly. Aiden knelt beside him. Tracks. Fresh ones. Not from last night, these were too crisp. 2 sets of footprints this time. One heavier. One lighter. Both moving toward the forest, not away from it. Whoever had been watching the cabin had come with someone else. And they hadn't been in a hurry. Aiden rubbed the back of his neck, pulse kicking up. Brisket looked up at him with a soft, worried whine. Aiden exhaled slowly. Yeah. I know. As they turned back toward the cabin, Aiden's phone buzzed again. He checked the screen. Captain Santos. Received everything. Starting the inquiry. But be alert. Someone might intercept it before it reaches the right hands. A chill ran through him. Brisket stepped closer, nudging Aiden's leg. Aiden forced a small smile. We're not alone anymore. The dog's tail twitched. The fire tower reveal. That afternoon, Kyle Monroe returned, this time without calling first. His truck barreled down the driveway, crunching through packed snow. He jumped out before the engine had fully shut off. Aiden, he said breathlessly, I found something you need to see. Brisket trotted up, sniffing Kyle's boots, confirming no danger before returning to Aiden's side. Kyle motioned toward the passenger seat. Come with me, both of you. Aiden hesitated only a moment before climbing in. Brisket hopped into the back, head poking through the space between the seats. Kyle drove them up a steep service road toward an old fire lookout tower. The higher they climbed, the more the landscape opened. Last night, Kyle said, gripping the wheel tightly, someone reported a vehicle up near the tower. A black SUV. No plates. Parked for hours before it left. Aiden stiffened. Kyle parked and gestured toward a clearing by the tower's base. There, half buried under snow, lay tire marks, thick, deliberate, cutting deep into the frozen earth. They were watching, Kyle said quietly. Not just your house. You. Brisket sniffed the tracks, following the invisible scent trail until he reached a point where the snow blurred it beyond recognition. He let out a sharp, distressed bark. Aiden's jaw set. He turned to Kyle. They're planning something. Kyle nodded grimly. And they're doing it soon. Brisket stared into the distance, tail stiff, shoulders drawn tight. His ears turned toward a faint sound only he could hear, something carried on the high mountain wind. Something coming. The unspoken decision. Back at the cabin, as dusk settled over Livingston, Aiden began packing what mattered, documents, drives, notes, a few essentials. Brisket watched from the doorway, tail curled around his paws. This isn't running, Aiden whispered. It's moving first. Brisket stepped forward, nudged Aiden's hand, then rested his head against Aiden's hip, an unspoken promise. Whatever happened next, they faced it together. The last light of day bled across the snow, painting the forest in shades of fire and shadow. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Something was coming. And neither man nor dog could pretend otherwise. Night dropped over Livingston like a curtain, black, heavy, deliberate. The sky held no stars. Clouds smothered every glimmer of moonlight, leaving only the faint orange glow of the cabin windows flickering against the snow. Inside, Aiden finished securing the last envelope of documents inside a waterproof pack. Brisket sat by the front door, stock still, as if waiting for the next move before it happened. "Everything we need is here," Aiden murmured. "After tonight, we're done hiding." Brisket's ears twitched. A sudden hum vibrated through the cabin walls, a low mechanical growl cutting through the night. A vehicle. Aiden's breath stilled in his chest. Brisket rose to his feet with a silent tension that made the air feel thinner. Headlights washed across the window. Not a car. A convoy. Two black SUVs rolled to a stop at the edge of the property, lights dimming. Their engines idled with that distinct, expensive from corporate security vehicles always had, heavy, polished, masked with a false sense of civility. Aiden extinguished the lamp. The cabin fell dark. Brisket pressed against his leg, silent but taut. Aiden moved to the window, peeking through a narrow slit in the curtain. Figures stepped out of the SUVs, 4, maybe 5. They wore dark coats, the kind meant to blend into the night, not stand out. They spread across the property, moving with military precision. And between them, Helen Ward. Her expression was carved from ice, her gaze fixed on the cabin like she had already won. So this was it. They had come to take the dog. Take the evidence. Or silence both permanently. Aiden felt the old war instinct kick in. Calm. Precise. Cold. His heartbeat slowed to the exact rhythm it used to have before entering a hot zone. He whispered, "Stay low, buddy." Brisket didn't budge from his side. The first move. Helen stepped forward. Her voice carried across the snow, too calm for someone approaching a man at night in the middle of nowhere. "Aiden," she called, "this doesn't need to escalate. We're just here for what belongs to us." Aiden didn't respond. Every light in the cabin remained off. Helen continued, patience thinning. "Hand over the dog. And anything he found. You'll walk away from this untouched." Brisket growled, a deep, trembling growl that came from something older than fear. Helen nodded toward her men. "Bring him out." Two of the figures advanced, fanning out toward the back of the cabin. Aiden grabbed his pack and crouched beside Brisket. "We're leaving," he whispered. "The long way." He slid open the cellar hatch hidden under the kitchen rug. Cold, dark air wafted upward. It led to a narrow crawlspace under the cabin, an escape route the previous owner had installed to avoid mountain predators, but Aiden had reinforced it long ago. He motioned Brisket through. The dog slipped inside silently. Aiden followed, lowering the hatch without a sound. Above them, footsteps creaked across the porch. They'd arrived seconds before the break-in. The escape through the hollow ground. The crawlspace was cramped, the air damp, the ground uneven with frozen dirt. Aiden shuffled behind Brisket, moving toward the exit hatch 50 yards away beneath a cluster of pines. Brisket stopped suddenly. Aiden froze too. Shadows passed overhead. Footsteps. Voices. Someone had circled around the cabin faster than expected. Aiden held his breath. After several agonizing seconds, the footsteps drifted away. They kept crawling. When they reached the exit hatch, Aiden listened carefully. Nothing. Just wind pushing through pine needles, whispering across the snow. He pushed the hatch open. Cold air rushed in. They emerged beneath the trees, crouched low, the cabin now a dim glow through the forest. Aiden pointed toward the truck parked deeper in the woods, a secondary vehicle he'd hidden for emergencies. But the moment they reached the clearing, Brisket stopped dead. Aiden followed the dog's gaze. A dark figure stood beside the truck. Kyle Monroe. Covered in snow. Breathing hard. Rifle slung over his shoulder. "You're late," Kyle whispered. Aiden exhaled sharply. "How did you?" "Your cabin's surrounded," Kyle said. "I spotted them on the ridge. Figured you'd take the crawl route." Brisket ran to him, tail flicking once in relief. Kyle knelt and ruffled the dog's ears. "Not letting you face this alone." Aiden nodded once, grateful in a way words couldn't capture. Kyle gestured toward the mountain trail. "We take the back road. Sheriff's office already got the files from Cecilia, and Santos confirmed federal interest. We just need to get you two safe until this blows open." Aiden climbed into the truck. Brisket jumped into the passenger seat. Kyle started the engine. The tires spun in the snow. Then headlights flared behind them. Helen Ward stepped into the beam, her silhouette framed like a specter. "No one leaves," she said, voice sharp as a knife edge. 3 figures emerged from the trees, weapons raised, not military rifles, but corporate-grade crowd control arms. Non-lethal, but enough to incapacitate. Kyle swore under his breath. "They cut us off." Aiden tightened his jaw. "They think they can corner us." Brisket's ears pricked. He looked up at Aiden. Then something shifted in him, something old, something fierce. He jumped out of the truck before Aiden could stop him. "Brisket makes the call." Brisket ran, not toward the cabin, not toward safety, but toward the clearing, barking sharply, drawing attention. Helen's men snapped their weapons toward him. "No!" Aiden shouted, throwing the truck door open. But Brisket wasn't attacking. He was running in circles, barking loudly, intentionally pulling all focus onto himself. Helen hissed, "Grab him." 2 men scrambled forward, stepping into a patch of snow that looked smooth, too smooth. Aiden saw it at the same moment Brisket did. The frozen ground wasn't solid there. Those were the old irrigation trenches he hadn't refilled completely. Covered by snowfall. Weak under the weight of grown men. The moment they stepped, the snow collapsed. Both men crashed waist-deep into the hidden trenches, trapped, their weapons slipping into the snow. Kyle seized the moment. Now. He and Aiden bolted from the truck. Brisket sprinted back toward them, skidding across the snow. Helen snarled at her remaining guard, "Stop them. Now." But Kyle had already raised his rifle, not aiming to kill, just to warn. He fired one shot into the air. The sharp crack echoed across the clearing. The guard flinched. Aiden grabbed Brisket, scooped him into his arms, and dashed toward the truck. Kyle dove into the driver's seat and floored it. The tires spun once. Then the truck lurched forward, barreling down the mountain road, snow spraying behind them. Helen disappeared into the storm as they sped away. The truth comes out. By dawn, Aiden, Kyle, and Brisket reached the sheriff's station, where federal officers awaited, eyes tired, faces grim, armed not with rifles but subpoenas. Brisket walked between them calmly, as though he understood the significance. Every document Aiden had gathered. Every number Brisket remembered. Every file Cecilia annotated. Every discrepancy Santos tracked. They all converged into one undeniable truth. Lawnguard Corp wasn't facing a scandal. It was facing collapse. Because of a dog who listened. A dog who remembered. A dog they tried to kill. The final morning. A week later, the storm had long since passed. Livingston thawed. Snow dripping from rooftops. Sunlight returning. Peace settling back into place. Aiden stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, watching Brisket chase a stray leaf across the yard. Kyle leaned against his cruiser, sipping coffee. "You know," Kyle said, "you could get a commendation for this." Aiden shook his head. "Not interested." Kyle smiled. "Figured." Brisket bounded back toward them, tail wagging, eyes bright, lighter than they'd been since the day Aiden found him trembling beneath that bridge. Aiden crouched, rubbing the dog's ears. "You're safe now," he whispered. Brisket leaned into him with a soft, grateful sigh. For the first time in months, the world didn't feel like it was closing in. It felt open. Bright. Possible. And everything that had tried to bury the truth, every lie, every threat, every shadow, had been defeated by the simplest thing. A dog who paid attention. A dog who remembered. A dog who refused to be erased. Aiden looked out across the hills and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope.